Welcome to the Bible Made Clear. So today we are going to continue on in part two of going through reasons why evolution really doesn't work, that only creation does. And so we are calling this Reasons for Creation Against Evolution. But uh, as I ended off with this heading in last week's, I just wanted to continue on here so that we could actually have a kind of a fresh start with this one slide. So, abiogenesis, life from nothing. It is impossible. It's not that it's not even plausible. It's not in the realm of possibility. If I held a rock in this hand and then a human being in the other, we're saying if you give it enough time, the rock will become human. It doesn't work. You don't even, it doesn't matter what kind of time you give it, the rock isn't going to become an amoeba. It just doesn't, it doesn't happen like that. It doesn't work. So there is no, and this is the reason we take this position. Not just because the Bible teaches that God created, because you do need a being that is outside of the time space continuum to create, um, that is not part of space, time, and matter. You need a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, intelligent, willing, right, being that is going to um, do this work, an original, uncaused cause. It's the only way that this can occur. Um, Obviously, when you list all the attributes, that's God, or what we call God. And when you go and deal with the Bible specifically, it certainly proves that it is the biblical God. But theism is the only solution. Otherwise, we're making up our own science. We're doing kind of we're getting into the realm of metaphysics and doing a lot of dancing around things to try to avoid reality. But the bottom line is that there is no evidence that life can come from non-life. None, zero. It can't even be done with scientists in the lab adding all their intelligence to their experiments. So no matter what we do, we can't do it. So if we can't do it with intelligence, with all the technology and everything else that we bring to bear on this, how is it going to happen on its own by accident? Um, and you know, given the fact that you can provide the primordial soup and the water, the lightning, and all the mixing and everything else, no, it's not a reality. No one knows what life actually is, so it certainly can't be created in a lab. Um, Nobody actually understands what life is. I mean, we have it, but what is it? It's there's a consciousness in human beings, one that animals don't have. Animals don't have self-consciousness. God gave them the same kind of life principle, but there's obviously something different in humans than animals. Animals do not possess the same moral rationality and everything else that human beings have. And you have even a different form of life um, in the plants, right? Um, all the herbs that exist that were created. There's kind of a programmed mechanism of life, but there's not even a consciousness. Um, I mean, you can leave those seeds in those packages in the store for years, and amazingly as it is, you put them in the ground, add some water with the dirt, and all of a sudden they start growing. It's just amazing. So, but nobody knows what that actually is. Nobody knows what life is. So, evolutionists want to ignore the law of causality and begin with life as if it can be overlooked in the realm of science, but that is not scientific. And it is a major oversight that cannot be ignored. It's convenient. That's about it for them. Next, homology is evidence really against evolution. Evolutionists believe homology helps them. However, really, in the end, it works against them. So homology is similarities in structure, right, and DNA, and they are the similarities in structure, the homology and DNA are evidences of a common ancestor based on the presuppositions of evolutionists. So they say, well, things look the same, and carbon-based life has the same kind of DNA, building blocks in them. So one thing must have come from another. Though again, there's no evidence that shows that or demonstrates that. It's just really an assumption that's made, and the dots are connected philosophically, not scientifically. Homology and DNA reveal a common designer, not a common ancestor. Interestingly enough, creationists often talk about DNA being God's fingerprints, and if any of you remember, and if you haven't seen it, you should watch it, the documentary that Ben Stein did some years ago called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. And he actually went in and dealt with the issue of how people were losing their jobs because of mentioning intelligent design, just mentioning it, and not teaching it, not promoting it, just talking about it. And so in that documentary, at the end of the documentary, Stein is interviewing Richard Dawkins, and he kind of pushes him, and Dawkins says, well, because he's pushing him on design and everything, and he said, well, we could see the fingerprints of design, and it's possible that the planet was somehow seeded by an intelligent life form, basically, out in space or from some other planet. Can't be God, but it can be, it can be the little green men from Mars or whatever he wants to dream up that's out there. So again, not scientific. There's nothing scientific about it. It's a biased rationality that he's promoting. But either way, even he, though he says there's no evidence of design in anything, says, well, there is some fingerprints of design. If it's there, then it would be because a designer rather than God. But the question is, does similarity of structure prove a common ancestor? Well, obviously, no, because there are many things that have similarities, but that doesn't mean that they are one thing from another. Now, obviously, the spoon did not give rise to the pot. One was not from the other. They are all made independently based on what their need was. And we have the idea that Tim Berra put forth many years ago, where he offered the progression of the Corvette as evidence of descent with modification, and how through the years the Corvette improved. Well, there was a problem. It's now called Berra's blunder, because it's really an illustration of intelligent design, that there was intelligence working at the lab, designing a better Corvette each time they put them out, and so that had nothing to do with descent with modification. Now, scientists make biased speculations, and that is
when this video series was being filmed on location at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, the executive producer noticed a discrepancy between museum drawings of Rhodocetus and the fossils. The reconstruction of Rhodocetus had a whale fluke, but there were no fossils of the tail to confirm this. Dr. Phil Gingrich, the scientist responsible for the discovery and reconstruction of Rhodocetus, was questioned how he knew there was a whale fluke on Rhodocetus, since that part of the fossil was missing.
What was the reasoning that the scientists think there was a fluke on Rhodocetus based on the other pieces of anatomy?
Well, I told you we don't have the tail in Rhodocetus, so we don't know for sure whether it had a ball vertebra indicating a fluke or not. So I speculated it might have had a fluke.
Scientist Gingrich also acknowledged that the flippers were drawn on the diagram without these fossils. Now, he does not believe this animal had flippers. Again, his answer was surprising, since the museum diagrams had flippers on Rhodocetus.
Now, since then, we've found the forelimbs, the hands, and the front arm, the arms, in other words, of Rhodocetus. And we understand that it doesn't have the kind of arms that can be spread out like flippers are on a whale. And if you don't have flippers, I don't think you can have a fluke tail in really powered swimming. And so I now doubt that Rhodocetus would have had a fluke tail.
Many experts consider whales to be the best fossil evidence for evolution, but are unaware of these discrepancies.
So that is one example, obviously, of how scientists make these guesses. They're filling in the blanks. And notice in this case and so many others, these evolutionary scientists attempting to prove what they assume is true will end up providing all kinds of information to fill in the blanks based on their preconceived bias. I mean, obviously, one of the best examples is the Nebraska man where they found a pig's tooth, but yet they made a whole family of what they look like. No bias there, right? So very interesting. Now again, we'll see that it's not science. And this is actually supposed to play.
I was surprised that the skull wasn't more complete. I thought you had this full, because I've always seen the models in the museums of the full skull. How did you figure out what the shape of the skull? Was it based on these bones, or did you have other fossils to go from?
So the shape of the skull is based on the fossils that we have, and so we have the parts that have the eye and the brain case and the back of the snout. We don't have the tip of the snout, which is unfortunate because we don't know where the nasal opening was, therefore. However, we did find the whole lower jaw, so we do know how long that snout was. We don't have a sense for its exact shape. So that's based on related animals. Those related animals all have the nasal opening way in the front, so those related animals would be Cuchicitus and Pachycetus. Those have their nasal opening way in the front, so it's likely that Amniocetus had that too, but we don't know that.
mean, this is obviously, this is all bias and inference and hope it's like that. That's really, this isn't, it's not science. Um, if you have no blowhole that's, starting to be formed in the fossil, then, and you don't even have that part of the fossil, why would you put it there? I mean, just basing it off of other things. Again, the assumption is that one thing comes from another, and if the, you know, um, there's some form of homology, so it probably is. But, if creation is said, well, it probably is, then, their feet would be held to the fire. Well, these scientists that are really nothing more than they're just people that practice in this field, and they're making speculations. It's not science if it's biased speculation. That's the whole point. Science doesn't say anything, however, scientists do. So Darwinists say that we know all of Earth's creatures share a common ancestor by way of unguided macro evolutionary processes because of DNA and homology, like we were talking about. And how do we know that DNA and homology all point to a common ancestor rather than a common designer? Because macroevolution is true. This is what we call circular reasoning. This is how their thinking works. How do you know evolution is true? Well, because of DNA and homology. Well, and then you have a common ancestor as a result. Why not a common designer? Well, because evolution is true. And then you're back to, how do you know evolution is true? Well, DNA and homology, common ancestor, right? So this is circular reasoning. You're basing one thing on there's no unbiased external base to measure from. It's also called begging the question, for those of you who are familiar with it. In other words, you're assuming what you're trying to prove. That's called begging the question. Now, the fossil record is another evidence, right, against evolution. The fossil record doesn't provide the evidence evolutionists claim. Evolutionists contradict themselves regarding the evidence, and Darwin's expectations didn't actually work out, his ideas on the fossil record. The fossil record is a story of circular reasoning based on presuppositions. So the question is, where's the evidence, right? So Darwin said, page 334 in his 6th edition of Origin of Species, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. Well, he says, why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? He asks the question. Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely granulated organic chain, and this perhaps is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against the theory. So he's saying, look, you need to have these numerous, slight modifications, but yet we don't see them. They don't exist. And he obviously expected that in time, that with all the future digging and fossils that would be discovered, that eventually he had the faith and hope that they would be found. We call that a pipe dream. Now, Stephen Gould, who is no longer with us, he passed away a number of years ago, but he was the paleontologist over at Harvard University right here in the backyard. And he says the fossil record does not support Darwinism. Well, he made his living in fossils, so what did he do? Well, he said the extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. The evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of their branches. The rest is inference, however reasonable, not the evidence of fossils. It may be what you would like to have, and that inference, he figured was okay, but it was non-existent also. National Geographic, in this older edition, it said in it, illuminating but spotty, the fossil record is like a film of evolution from which 999 of every 1,000 frames have been lost on the cutting room floor. So that was back in 2004. What is the definition of spotty? You got it right there, right? So what would the fossil record look like if creation were true? Now, evolutionists to the rescue. Here's Gould again. He co-authored a paper called Punctuated Equilibrium with Niles Eldredge in 1972. In this, they described how living things didn't evolve as Darwin stated, but instead punctuated to the next evolutionary stage and left no evidence in the fossil record. This was their solution to the lack of transitional forms in the record. In other words, you don't seek to actually use evidence anymore. You then come up with the reason why the evidence is gone or why it doesn't appear. Again, very convenient. Is it really sound science to create a non-observable, non-testable, non-existent explanation to offer support for the missing evidence of Darwinism? I don't think so. Did Gould and Eldredge realize that the evidence for their theory was missing, just as the transitional forms are? I don't know. I don't know if they thought that one through. But this is how the macro evolutionists, macro meaning one species to another, right? This is how they see everything connecting. You get this tree with all the links and they're all connected, right? Macro evolutionary changes within a type, yes, like on the left. Now, microevolutionary changes on the left between within a type like the dog family that's shown there, absolutely. Macroevolutionary changes between types, no, not at all. Doesn't exist. Gould was a professional paleontologist at Harvard. He said they didn't exist. It was clear. So it doesn't matter what evolutionists come up with, and they say, "Oh no, it really does show that." Hey, the top pro in the evolutionary field, him and Niles Eldredge, they wrote a paper because they knew that they weren't there, that they didn't exist. This is the true picture. Just as Stephen Gould said, right? You just have end nodes. You don't have any connecting points. The fossil record shows nothing connected. So basically you have all these forms and then you say, okay, what do we have for evidence that they connect? Nothing. What would we like to see? Oh, we'd like to see a tree that connects it all. Well, unfortunately, the links are all missing. There's a missing chain. There's nothing there. So you just have to kind of talk about it as a story or dream it up because it is non-existent. Now, the fossil record can't establish ancestral relationships. 99% of the biology of any organism resides in its soft tissue anatomy, which is inaccessible in a fossil. So most of what you need to make these connections cannot even exist in a fossil. To take a line of fossils and claim that they represent a lineage is not a scientific hypothesis that can be tested, but an assertion that carries the same validity as a bedtime story. amusing, perhaps even instructive, but not science. This was written by Henry Gee. He was the chief science writer for Nature, not a friend of creationism. How about variation and modification? They're really evidence against evolution. Now you're talking about even within a species, right? So within, one kind of family of animal or whatever. So Darwin could only show that there was modification within a species, but not that it created new species, right? With his finches. His presuppositions were passed on to his followers. Today, they all believe his speculation. So Darwin, in his ignorance of cell structure and everything else, and being unable to actually have any of the information that he would really need for evidence to come to a conclusion, speculated that because he saw the changes in the finches' beaks on the Galapagos Islands, he just speculated that you could just extrapolate that to beyond the species into a whole new body type and some other kind of form of, living organism. Well, speculation is the only way evolution can make any sense, since there is no scientific evidence to support it. I mean, if you want to live in the world of speculation, be an evolutionist. If you want to live in the land of science, well, it doesn't work like that. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't all believe that, because if you start to speak against evolution, you lose your job, you lose your funding. Really, everything becomes a non-starter as far as the scientific world, for the most part, functions. Okay, but that does not make it true. Opinions don't make truth. You can have 99.9% of the people in the world that believe that there is no gravity. It doesn't make it go away. Truth is never established by want, by vote, by majority opinion, or anything else. Truth is established based on our correlating our understanding of what we believe to what is actual. And what is actual is always based on evidence. How about the population of humans? This always really astounded me. Multiple studies have been done that have shown that if humans were here for more than about 6,000 years, the population would be far more than it is today. Evolutionists cannot account for the current population. Their time scale that requires extensive time for natural selection to perform the miracle of evolution. This for them is unfortunately far more than 6,000 years. Look, it really doesn't matter, how you want to slice this. You cannot have the current population of human beings in the world and have it go back before roughly 6,000 years or so. It's just not going to work. I mean, maybe 10 at the most, but that's even stretching it. Because there's been too many studies done. I mean, even adding in wars and diseases and all that create earlier deaths and all that. It really doesn't matter. You cannot just arbitrarily change population, and you certainly can't go back 50 million years. You go back to whenever you think that the first, kind of Homo sapien was evolved, and you need a whole lot more people in the world than there is, and it doesn't work. Now, because the smarter evolutionists know this, they keep trying to find um, the the link that goes back, and they try to shorten the time. The mitochondrial eve, where you take the mitochondria and you basically reduce it back in time, the mutations within the mitochondria, and then they can study that and they can go back and back, but it still comes back to no mutations around 6,000 years ago. That's biology. And, the development of people and the multiplication is relatively consistent over the years. So, look, the population doubles every so many years, and um, I mean, we're pushing almost 8 billion people in the world, though we haven't reached it yet at this point. And there wasn't that many, obviously, when I get out of high school in 1975. So, look, you can play with it all you want, but the numbers don't lie, and the figures. They say figures don't lie, but liars sure can figure. And I think that's what we're dealing with when we're starting to pretend that the population today is workable, assuming an evolutionary process. Experiments trying to prove evolution always disprove it, right? So evolutionists have been trying to duplicate the evolutionary scenario for years with no success. Moreover, they can't do it with their own intelligence added into the formula. How could they think that it could happen without any intelligence at all? And this similar point obviously was made with trying to create life from no life, abiogenesis. So anyways, I'll end it there. Obviously, this is a shorter video. It doesn't need to be long. Actually, the video could have been less than 5 minutes, or actually less than 30 seconds, because if you can't get life, it's a non-starter. So, you can have whatever elaborate evolutionary belief and theory that you'd like to. The reality is that it just doesn't work. It doesn't work scientifically. It doesn't work with the science that we know and understand today. It doesn't work at the beginning. Now, you can pretend that, overlooking the fact that life has no way to start in the first place is okay, and then just kind of take it from there. But if you can't have life, it's a non-starter. So it doesn't matter what you think it would be after that. If you can't get there in the first place, if you want to pretend that somehow it happened, and just because you weren't there, you can come up with all kinds of fanciful stories or whatever, but you still have to apply what we know to be science today, the law of causality and all that. You still have to be able to apply it back. And if you can't just make different rules and say, well, life probably happened because of this, or probably because of that. That's you can say that, but that's not science. See, the evolutionary scientists always criticize creationists for being non-scientific, or being anti-scientific, or against science, or pitting religion against science. And the reality is, they are the ones that are not scientific. They're the ones that are creating this artificial distinction between religion, or Christianity, if you will, and science. We're not anti-scientific. As a matter of fact, we're more scientific than they are, because we actually will use the evidence. We actually have an understanding through archaeology, the development of peoples and everything else, and biology, to know that you need a being that is outside of the time, space, matter existence of this universe to be able to create life. Certainly, if you can create the universe, life's not a problem for you, all right? Because part of the universe is the development of life on this planet. So everything that we believe as Christians, that the Bible teaches, aligns with what we know to be scientifically accurate today. All right? Because you always work law of causality, from effect with what we know back to cause. That's how you get a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, purposeful, powerful, intelligent being that created the whole universe and everything that we see. Now, you can ignore that, But the reality is that in ignoring that, you're ignoring the law of causality, and that is inference to the best explanation. The best explanation for why we're here and how everything functions, right? The design that we see in all life forms is God. Deny it if you want to, but you're being unscientific if you do. So don't claim because somebody mentions God, then somehow that's religion and that's not science. Because the bottom line is to be scientific, you still have to work effect to cause. And in this case, you're working your way back to the original uncaused cause that created the universe. And that being, we know ultimately to be the God of the Bible, but we know at least that that being needs to exist in order to create what we have here. And that's it. So until next time, may God richly bless you as you continue to study His Word.